Hey there, campers. It's Ian. A little bit of a different approach this time to the video for Lorcana. I have my Stitch playmat here. Ooh, shiny. Super stoked to have gotten that. I decided I was going to try out my tabletop setup. I've done one other video where I played Lindsay, through the setup, and I want to use this a little bit more for some content upcoming because we'll be testing for Atlanta, and so I would love to show off, or maybe even live stream some of that content, some of those games. So we're testing it here. Let me know if you like it in the comments or not. What I'm going to do here is briefly talk about my run to get this Stitch playmat. As you can see, it does not have the champion word. I placed second at the Battleground Store Championship here in Richmond/Midlothian, and so I want to break down my list, why I took it, which things felt great, which things didn't, and what sort of I would do if I were to play in a tournament again tomorrow, or maybe even in a month. We don't know how it's going to pan out in a month, but I do know that I'd say about 57 cards in here. I don't think I'm likely to ever change until new cards come out in Ursula's Return. So, all right. To keep it quick and brief here, because I don't want this to take too long, I did play Ruby Amethyst. At the end of the day, it's a very powerful, very flexible deck that doesn't take too many bad matchups. And that's kind of what I wanted. I was only able to play in this event. Most of the people in my area are going to 4 or 5. I was only able to go to 1. So I really wanted to make it count. So I took a deck that gave me a lot of skill expression, that also gave me the ability to have high consistency, so I'm not bricking hands, and one that I think doesn't take too many terrible matchups, even if the trade-off is that it doesn't have a ton of great matchups. So let me walk through the list here. I will add the context of, although I expected to see a lot of Emerald Steel, I expected to see a lot of Emerald Amethyst, although I did run into one of those, and I did win 2-0. I expected to see a wider range, and there were a good range of decks. I hit almost exclusively Ruby Amethyst mirror matches. So when I talk about these cards, I'm going to add the extra lens that hopefully will be interesting, which is what things felt good in the mirror, what things didn't. So, okay, with that said, let's get into it. So first off, I'm running 9 1-drops. I'm running 3 copies of Minnie Mouse, Always Classy. I'm running 3 copies of Olaf, Friendly Snowman. And I'm running 3 copies of Rafiki, Mystical Fighter. So why 3-3-3? At the end of the day, 1-3s are significantly stronger into what I'm seeing the most of in, not just in my metagame, but in the larger metagame. Rafiki is a fantastic card. I see a lot of people going a 1-4-4 split, right? So 4 Rafikis and 5 1-3s. That was not quite enough for me. The reality is that in, 80% of games, I want a 1-3. There's a lot more you can do with it. It's a lot more resilient to things like Storm Rage On, or if enemy players are playing Teeth and Ambition. Spoiler alert, I played 2 Teeth and Ambition for anticipating what my meta was going to offer. So these are significantly more valuable. I find Rafiki to be a bit underwhelming on turn 1. I love it in the mid game, so I didn't want to cut it, right? I want Rafikis. I just want them later in the game when you can play them down in conjunction with a rabbit or a goat, and they are not the biggest priority to your opponent, so they actually get an opportunity to trade into, locations or whatever. So Rafiki 3, and then these, and then 6 of these 1-3s. I'm going to sort of condense over here a little bit as we go through. All right, 2 drops. This is pretty standard, which is the 4 Madam Mim Snake. Madam Mim Snake is a busted card, really, really good at pretty much every stage of the game, as long as you have something that you don't mind bouncing, or obviously something you really want to bounce. The thing that I noticed with this is that I actually did not, because I was in the mirror, I often did not actually want to play this. About half the time I did not want to play this on turn 2. I would have rather gone wide, because in reality, against a lot of my opponents who ran greedier versions of this deck, I wanted to be the aggressor. This is a build that is, what I call maximum consistency, which is that I have a very low uninkable count. I'm trying to make sure that I'm putting the pressure on my opponent if I'm in the mirror or if I'm against another aggressive deck, that I'm at least able to keep pace so that when I flip the board, I'm able to actually close games out. So Snake is often better when you're bouncing things like Goat or Rabbit in the mid to late game. It's okay to ink one early in the game, but their value actually gets higher and higher as the game goes on, in my experience, especially in the mirror match. So the better 2-drop in my mind, and the one that I wish I could run like 6 copies of, but alas, we're only here, is the Kuzco. Only running 4, obviously, because that dims the rules, but I am obsessed with this card. I see so many decks cutting it or reducing the numbers of these, and I just don't understand why. I think this card is incredible into the majority of the things in the mirror. Yes, sometimes against like, Steel Song, you might prefer the 3 defense body of Madam Mim, but they're not super threatened by Kuzco usually. And so some players will just go ahead and leave Kuzco instead of killing it. And because of the other tools in your deck, he's likely to stick around. You can buff him up with a crab. You can bounce him with a fox, which we'll get into in just a second. And at the end of the day, if you are putting the pressure on against a control-y deck like Popsicles or a greedier version of Ruby Amethyst, he is a fantastic card to slam on turn 2 along with one of your 1/3s. You have a pretty resilient board. When they do clear it, you get to cash in those cards then and there. Boy, I wish I could run more copies of Kuzco. And that's something that I didn't really respect Kuzco until I really picked the deck up in preparation. And boy, I'm glad I landed where I did. I've got one Pinocchio Talkative Puppet. I won't reinvent the wheel here. It's just a great card to open up trades to things that your opponent just played. It has a lot of value. I'm only running 1, but it has a lot of value in bouncing it back in the mid game so that you can reuse it. And when your opponent has one in hand and you know that they've played one, it really freezes your plays and reduces the amount of lines that you could take. So Pinocchio is really strong. I don't play 2 because I don't like having a ton of uninkables, and I have from experience, when I have 2 in hand, I'm miserable. When I have 1 in hand, I'm hype. So I just run 1. All right, now for the broken card. Minnie Mouse Stylish Surfer is nuts. I mean, it's just nuts. It is nuts in pretty much every matchup. Yes, there are some matchups where you maybe don't slam it right on turn 3, but I feel like in most of them you generally do, especially if you're going first. Now, funny thing about my run is that I never won the die roll the entire day. So I was always going second in the first game. There were a few games where I wasn't able to jam Minnie on 3, or against some of the non-mirrors didn't want to or couldn't because I needed to take out units of a more aggressive opponent. But Minnie Mouse in most situations is the best 3-drop you can play on turn 3. And in some cases, when you're really trying to put the pressure on, just play another one on turn 4, right? Don't worry so much about jamming, a rabbit. If that's in your hand and you're deciding between a rabbit and a Minnie Mouse on turn 4, just play the Minnie Mouse because you can play the rabbit after they kill your stuff. So anyways, Minnie Mouse is just a cracked card. Most Ruby decks don't have super clean answers to it. So whether it's Ruby Sapphire or Ruby Amethyst, it's one of the best ways to put some pressure on. So we've got the crabs. There's been a lot said about crabs. I ran 4. I've seen some people running 3. It just feels essential to be able to trade up into locations like Queen's Castle and McDuck Manors. Feels essential to, if I'm in a mirror, buff up my Minnie Mouse to take out their Minnie Mouse, which is kind of one of the only ways you can respond to it as this deck. As we've determined, there's not a whole lot of ways you can kill Minnie. So Merlin Crab is a fantastic card. It also gives you so many opportunities to double buff things or buff 2 different things and trade in. It's a very skill expressive card that I really like. And then finally in 3, this is our most populated slot. We've got Madam Mim Fox. It's a rush character. It bounces things. It's just great. I found myself in the mirror inking it a lot. I think that this is a card that is not... It's really good in certain scenarios in the mirror, especially when you're bouncing a crab to get the +3 on it and taking it into a castle. That's essential. But past that, I did notice I was almost always wanting to preserve a wide board state in the mirror because I was playing against players who were playing dragons and a full, Jim Hawkins location lineup, right? And I'm like, these are decks that are not going to be able to respond early. I want to keep the pressure on, and bouncing something, like a Kuzco or a 1-drop is just not as good in most of the cases as just maintaining my wide board state. So I did ink this quite a bit, which felt right. in the moment. But of course, in all the other matchups where you're playing, this is the way that you kill Ursulas. This is the way that you kill Ariels. Really, really good card, obviously. Otherwise, people wouldn't play it. Merlin Rabbit, card draw. I'm not going to over-explain this. I'll just remind you of what I said earlier. You don't have to play this on 4. You can play this later in the game. You can just sit on it. If you have a Minnie Mouse to play or a Kuzco and a 1-drop, like, you don't have to play this. And then Goat. Goat is, I think, one of the cards that is misused by Ruby Amethyst players the most, and that they sit on it for forever. And they decide, oh, I'm going to wait till I can wombo combo it at the end of the game. No, just jam one early, because then by the time you get to the end game, you'll probably find another one. And more likely, if you play this, on turn 4, your opponent may not be able to deal with it, and then you can turn around and this is a good card to be bouncing with Fox and Snake and replaying multiple times throughout the course of the game. If you can play Goat 3 times in the game, you're probably just winning. So yeah, Goat, fantastic card. Obviously, Maui, in the mirror, he's a really interesting card because most of the time he's not super helpful. Because cards are either like Minnie Mouse or they're a bunch of 1-drops. So you're like, I could play the Maui and trade into the 1-drops. It's fine, but he's not really pressuring or being able to keep pace with your opponent himself because he can't quest and he's reckless. But he's essential for hitting Queen's Castle. So he's in this really weird, delicate balance. One thing I noticed in the matchup is I was constantly monitoring my opponent's Mauis. Did they ink a Maui in the early game? Did they play one before a Be Prepared turn? How many Mauis are out there? Because I am making these, and same thing with crabs, right? Do they have a crab in hand? Have they bounced a crab already, right? How many foxes? These are the 3 cards, actually, that I was tracking from my opponent the most because I wanted to know if somebody could respond to my castles or not. And I did find that in the mirror, typically the player that could stick the castle at the right time and not have it get immediately cleared. And that is a skill. It's not a luck thing. I think I've heard people kind of complain, well, it's just lucky. Can they respond or not? Sometimes you just want to hold on to it until you have a better idea of what their hand is and that they're not playing, they don't have these 3 cards to respond. And that way you can make that educated guess and say, I've seen 2 Mauis. I know they don't have a crab in hand. This is probably safe to play. And that tended to be the player that would win the games. Lady Tremaine, Madame Medusa, 2 and 2. This is the standard line. They're great cards. I have no evolution on this. I have nothing new to contribute to the conversation. I think I like to run 2 and 2. Obviously, in the mirror match, Medusa is a little bit stronger than Tremaine because Medusa can clear a lot of the key cards, like Minnie Mouse, can clear other Lady Tremaines, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I have nothing really more to add to that. Now, we're done with characters. As you can see, I kept the curve real low. I'm not playing any of those sort of greedier top-end cards like Maleficent Dragon, Ursula, Power Hungry, or anything like that. I'm just keeping it lean. And I genuinely think that this is I would never change this group of cards. I don't think I would ever change or mess with any numbers of this group of cards. I do have one more character I'll leave to the end and tell you why I played it and why I wouldn't play it again. I've got 4 friends on the other side, excuse me. Card draw. Nothing there. 3 Be Prepared. This trend of cutting one of the Be Prepared, so it's a little bit of a glare here. Maybe I can, there we go. This trend of cutting one of the Be Prepareds originally I really hated. And then the night before, I just was playing on Pixelborn, and I had too many games where I had 2 of them in hand at once. And so I said, you know what, fine. I'm going to cut 1 Be Prepared. Super glad that I did, because I still ran into situations where I had 2 or even 3 Be Prepareds in my hand at the same time during the event. It was the least valuable player of the tournament, but I think that was mostly because of all the mirrors I was in, and when to play Be Prepared in the mirror is often a really odd, clunky decision. You're either in desperation mode and you're really just stalling and maybe not setting up a line to win, or it's a situation where you're like gauging your opponent's ability to respond the following turn, or if you have a Queen's Castle, then sometimes it's a good play. But anyways, I think you need 3, but also it's really frustrating to have to run those, and I will be maybe tinkering and experimenting with a be prepared free version of this, which is much maybe it's just basically aggro. Anyways, I think for this deck you need 3, and I don't like the 4th. I don't think I'd cut it down to 2 though. That seems risky. All right, we've got the 4 Queen's Castle. I've alluded to it plenty. Again, sorry about the glare. I'll shift it over. It's a great card. It's a bonkers card, but you can't just always jam it. Some games, some matchups, you jam it on 4 or 5, and you're like, yay, my opponent is playing a deck that doesn't have a great way to respond. Fantastic. But especially in the mirror, it's so dicey. I heard players talking about, well, just ink it. It's a bad card in the mirror. I disagree. I do think it's good in the mirror. You just have to be patient. Yeah, sometimes you have to ink it because you have to play other cards, right? And if you're sitting there going, well, I'm between playing a rabbit and a Queen's Castle on 4 in the mirror, you probably just play the rabbit and you ink the Queen's Castle because, right, the rabbit's going to get you that guaranteed card draw, and you're going right into a Maui turn. And their hand is likely not thinned down to the point where you have the information to know that it's safe. But there are so many games where you're looking at this and you're going, if I can time this right, I just win the game. I held on to 2 of these at one point in a game, and my opponent prepared the board. I had all these great, I think I had a couple Minnie Mouses, and I just responded with 2 Queen's Castles. And I basically won the game on the spot right there. It was a late game scenario. My opponent was able to play a Maui the following turn, but they weren't able to play a Maui and a crab, so they put 6 damage on 1. I collected 4. The next turn they were able to kill 1, but at that point I had already reestablished a couple more units, and it was game over from there. So, okay. I played 2 Teeth and Ambitions, which was a tech call. It's a meta call. This is... there are 3 slots in this deck that I think are up for grabs, and I wish I felt super good about any one of them, but I don't. Teeth and Ambitions is kind of a meh card, but it's really the only way that you can kill things, kill little things, right? So this was because I expect to see a lot of Emerald Steel. I expect to see a lot of Emerald Amethyst. They were there. I just didn't hit a ton of them. This is also sort of helpful against Steel Song. If they have a slightly clunky start, you can kill their Cinderellas, stuff like that. It's good with all of these 1/3s. Again, that's another reason why I ran a higher count of 1/3s. But I think that this is like a tech card slot. So if you wanted to cut these and put in, I would try to make it an inkable card. Again, as you can see, I like to keep my inkable super lean. I'm literally running 11, excuse me, 12 with Pinocchio. But you could go to another uninkable. You could play this as, some higher top end if you wanted to, if you felt confident doing that. And then finally, there's Jim Hawkins. This is the 60th card that I couldn't make up my mind on for like 3 days. I tried out a few other things. I tried out Yzma, the 6-drop. I tried out, maybe another location. I tried out a bunch of weird things, and at the end of the day, I just played Jim Hawkins because I couldn't make up my mind. I like the card, and sometimes it's so turbo if you're able to get one of these. But I came to the conclusion afterwards that I think that was silly. I inked it every time I saw it. I never saw it in conjunction with the castles. My opinion is you either need to run like a full Jim Hawkins suite or probably no Jim Hawkins. And so what I would do instead, I would probably just play the card that most people are going to look at and say, where is this? Which is 1 copy of Maleficent Sorceress. Maleficent Sorceress is a good card, but it is slow. And what I mean by that is that the best use of this card is at the end of the game, after a Be Prepared turn, where you were trying to outvalue your opponent, and you have 9 ink or 8 ink or whatever, and you're able to play this, draw something that is playable, and also play that. Playing this on turn 3 is a not good play. I'll just say that. Like, in most scenarios, not in all, but in most scenarios, playing this on 3 was what allowed me to beat other Ruby Amethyst decks, because I'm playing something that's either, clearing things on the board like Snake, like Fox or Crab, or I'm playing Minnie Mouse and jamming a quester and questing in their face the following turn, and this little 2/2 body just doesn't do anything. It just doesn't do anything. But it's kind of like, if by playing this, you're sort of saying, I'm actually going to play 59 cards, because this card is just going to become one of these other cards. At an end game scenario, or it's just going to be ink in the early game. So I would probably make that adjustment. You could run the Yzma 6-drop. I do like it. It's just it's a little bit of a weird top deck if you have an empty hand, because you actually can't you don't want to give your opponent cards, but you can't really give yourself cards. So I don't like the Yzma because of some scenarios, but I might just need to give it a second chance and a little bit more opportunity to shine, because I do think the 6-drop Yzma in this Jim Hawkins slot could be pretty good. So anyways, there's the list. Hope you didn't mind me rattling on about it. If you do have any questions about this list and why I chose to run it, I do, like I said, think that I would never change 57 of the cards. These are the only cards I would change. Right here is these teeth and the gem. Everything else I think is pretty locked in, and it is in consideration for me to play at Atlanta, but I just think I want to try some other things that are maybe, a little more fun. This deck is a deck that is out there. People know about it. I do think that some people make some mistakes in their deck building, not playing enough minis, not playing enough Kuzcos, but at the end of the day, it's a known quantity, and you're not going to want to, at least I would not say that my tournament experience was as fun as it could have been, just because I hit so many dang mirrors and it was kind of a grindy, exhausting affair. No disrespect to my opponents, who all played fantastic, but you get tired of playing mirrors. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. If you appreciated this content, if you want to see more like it, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. I forgot to say that earlier in the video, but you're here now, so I'm telling you now. And don't forget to join the Discord if you want to ask questions in more detail, get connected with myself and Brendan, and talk all about all the new stuff coming to Lorcana. We're going to do some more videos about some of the Ursula's Return stuff, so keep yourself appraised by hitting that bell and keeping your eyes peeled. Cool. We'll see you next time.